It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Welcome to the weekly installment of the Bad News broadcast. Yes, that light at the end of the tunnel is most definitely an oncoming train. Let's get started. First headline from Bloomberg News: dimming the sun is a terrifying new industry. Terrifying, yes. New, no. Climate engineering operations have been ongoing and accelerating for over 80 years. Operations that could not be more obvious as they regularly rage above our heads, blotting out our formerly blue skies, often covering the entire horizon with a filthy, dirty-looking overstory aerosol haze, commonly with lingering, spreading, geoengineering jet-sprayed linear dispersion trails of toxic climate engineering nanoparticle elements. All of it settling down through the air column, contaminating virtually everything, including every breath we take. And again, it isn't jet exhaust, it isn't condensation, it's a sprayed nanoparticle dispersion, as volumes of data, history, lab testing, and inarguable film footage conclusively proves. Stay tuned for a new science study on what some of these particles are doing to our vascular system and thus our health and life expectancy. Or should I say, lack of it. Next, another new headline that pretends climate engineering is just a dangerous proposal and not an ongoing, accelerating 80-year-old reality. From ClimateWire, this breaking headline: the strange and totally real plot to blot out the sun and reverse global warming. The report then states a 25-person startup is developing technology to block the sun and turn down the planet's thermostat. Let's stop there. Summary of this headline report: yet more total mass deception, just like the long-touted as a distraction excuse for official agencies, smoke and mirrors idiocy of the Make Sunsets Silicon Valley PR clowns, two of them that launched a few balloons into the air from Baja California and Reno, I believe, and they call this geoengineering, as if this is what we're seeing in our sky. It's a meaningless matrix media manufactured idiotic distraction that EPA head Lee Zeldin is still referring to, even today, while pretending he knows absolutely nothing about any geoengineering operations. Just harmless condensation, says Mr. Zeldin. On a Newsmax interview I did this week, I pointed out Mr. Zeldin's blatant deception tactics to the host, who seemed to struggle with such a conclusion, though I hope it sunk in. Question: where are all the flag-waving Maha zealots? Don't they understand that Maha everything means absolutely nothing unless or until the weather, chemical, biological warfare operations in our skies are fully exposed and halted? Maha mass distraction, taking red dye out of Fruit Loops while the onslaught of spraying in our skies rages on. Next, a half-truth headline at best from foreignpolicy.com: Techno-Optimism can't save us from climate change. From the report: hoping blindly for a technological solution for climate change that may never come is no solution. Let's stop there. Let's correct that headline. First, we don't face what the vast majority want to pretend is just climate change. The applicable science term for what's unfolding, for what we now collectively face, is abrupt climate collapse. Second, the so-called techno-solution that the foreign policy headline refers to has already been deployed for over 80 years, a climate engineering, weather warfare, Manhattan Project from which there is no return. Almost none yet seem able to even face the truth, let alone speak to it, in our current paradigm of power structure programmed pathological delusion, denial, and deception. I recently spoke with a U.S. Air Force veteran that does have the courage to tell the truth. He pinned the following statement and sent it to me this week. Quote: as a retired U.S. Air Force air traffic controller who is certified in both the control tower and radar facility, the two most important things I had to know were aircraft characteristics and weather dissemination. He continues, it is because of these two critically important categories that I know the smeary lines in the sky are not aircraft contrails. First, many of the aircraft that I worked as a controller are still flying. The only time I had observed the military aircraft leaving long-lasting trails like you see today is when they purposely sprayed a mixture, including aluminum, for the purpose of radar jamming. The second reason should make everyone concerned. In 2017, the World Meteorological Organization came out with 12 new clouds, with one being aircraft contrails that formed clouds. Why? Question mark, he says. The USAF veteran continues with this. To sum it up, you have patents for atmospheric spraying. You visually can see the smeary trails. And finally, the Worldwide Weather Organization, responsible for clouds and cloud types, had to add a whole new category of clouds. Again, he asks, why? Question mark. I will definitely keep the line open with this U.S. Air Force veteran. Moving on, from the UK Guardian, dark forces are preventing us fighting the climate crisis by taking knowledge hostage. That headline is from George Monbiot. And about this Guardian headline and the author, first, yes, there is a climate collapse crisis. Yes, there are dark forces that are making it far worse. And yes, they are hiding the truth. So here's my point to the author, George Monbiot, who has in the past mocked the climate engineering elephant in the equation. George, tell the truth about climate engineering first if you want us to listen to anything else you have to say. Should George Monbiot be sent a link to the dimming documentary from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org? You decide. But that is certainly an effective way to start a spot fire of awareness, sending a link to the dimming to agency officials, media officials, ag organizations, environmental organizations. The list is endless. Start a spot fire of awareness. Stoke that fire. Help to wake others. In regard to the plethora of toxic climate engineering fallout nanoparticles that we're all inhaling with every breath we take, not just heavy metals, but polymer nanoparticles, which are a component of climate engineering operations. From news.ucr.edu, microplastics hit male arteries hard. Again, this is ongoing worsening story. I've covered it in many broadcasts, but these are new headlines getting worse all the time. From the report, a study led by the University of California, Riverside biomedical scientists suggests that everyday exposure to microplastics, tiny fragments shed from packaging, clothing, and countless plastic products, not to mention climate engineering in our skies, may accelerate the development of atherosclerosis, the artery clogging process that leads to heart attacks and strokes. Never mind the climate engineering nanopolymer fallout in every breath we take, which the report, of course, doesn't mention. Now let's ponder this new report from Science Daily about an ever-worsening and irreversible threat to every living organism, including us. Here's the headline, more on the same theme. Every day, microplastics could be fueling heart disease. Microplastics, the report says, may be silently fueling heart disease by damaging the very cells that keep arteries healthy. Yes, more of the could, may, might half-truths. There is no could, may, might be causing harm. Micro and nanoplastics are absolutely causing irreversible damage. From the report, quote, the study also showed that microplastics, and again, they're not even taking into account nanopolymers, part of climate engineering, which are far worse, interfere with the function and makeup of cells lining the arteries. New research shows the danger may be far greater for males. There are currently no effective ways to remove microplastics from the body. Let's stop there. Yes, again, microplastics are that bad, but not by accident. This Science Daily report doesn't even, again, mention nanoplastic particles, which, as I stated, are inconceivably smaller and even more harmful and completely unreported. Climate engineering nanoparticle, everything is a synergistically toxic plethora of bioavailable and bioaccumulative contamination. There is absolutely no place to hide. No living thing is exempt from this assault, and this is on the top of the endless list of other human contamination from every conceivable direction, which includes the big pharma witch's brew injection concoctions that so many are so willing to roll up their sleeves for and embrace, seemingly completely clueless of the increasingly likely consequences. Welcome to industrialized, militarized, so-called society. Total self-annihilating insanity. And even now, the vast majority continue to blindly embrace this paradigm and the criminal controllers that manipulate it, at least for the moment. A summary of our common dilemma later in this broadcast. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political global alert news report, The End of the World as We Know It broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Quick footnote, for those that truly want to help sound the alarm, very effective climate engineering awareness-raising materials are available on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org, full-color printed materials, which we pass on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We also have Geoengineering Watch shirts with restocked sizes, colors. We have hoodies. Again, all of these are great conversation starters. Our only goal, our only mission at geoengineeringwatch.org, to expose and halt the insanity in our skies once and for all. Moving on, methane update. And yes, the atmospheric methane issue is extraordinarily serious. In fact, it's an existential threat, extremely near-term existential threat. And no, I'm not talking about cow flatulence. Formerly frozen entire methane deposits that are now thawing and exploding into ocean depths and tundra, and then migrating into the atmosphere, covering the planet like a heat-trapping layer of glass. That's exactly what's occurring. Methane, over a 10-year time horizon, is 120 times more potent than CO2 at trapping heat. And again, climate engineering making all of it worse. The climate engineering nanoparticles trapping more heat than they deflect, further fueling the thermal energy buildup on the planet. About the methane threat. From the UK Independent, this headline, methane pollution still rises, but UN reports hope for near-future reductions. Total delusion. The report says UN officials say methane emissions are still going up, they're skyrocketing, but they have hope that cutting them in coming years could have a big implication for slowing the Earth's warming. Let's stop there. This report is total hopium. Again, this example, it's like pretending you can put a new set of brakes on the car after you have just crashed through the guardrail and are sailing through the air toward the bottom of the canyon. Too late. The only question now is, will anyone survive the ride? And above it all, the weather warfare rages on. A quick footnote on the facade anti-climate engineering so-called activists that continue to pretend to be fighting against climate engineering while actually adamantly denying climate engineering. Just jet exhaust, they say. Just condensation, they say. A case in point, the following statement from one of their posts. Quote, still seeing trails over banned states? It's because it's just jet exhaust and condensation. Really? How moronic can such a statement be? To claim that the geoengineering jet dispersions that are still taking place over states that have passed bans is actually because it's all just jet exhaust and condensation, as if the powers that shouldn't be would suddenly halt their omnicidal operations because of a new state law that they couldn't care less about. Again, it isn't hard to recognize the con artist disinformation pushing sources and sites that claim to be fighting climate engineering while at the same time completely denying it. Moving on, another headline of, oh my God, it's way worse than we thought. From phys.org, coastal ocean acidification advancing faster than expected, threatening local economies. Let's stop there. Not just threatening local economies, threatening all life on Earth. It's called Canfield Ocean. Look it up. Why are the oceans acidifying so fast? Because we're pumping literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon into the atmosphere every day, and guess where it ends up? In the oceans. And still today, people ranting, carbon is great, the more the better. No, when you completely disrupt the former miraculous atmospheric chemistry and oceanic chemistry, bad things happen. You can't live like we have lived and expect to live long. That's the fact of the matter, with climate engineering being the epitome of that stupidity. But there's so many more facets to it. This paradigm was never sustainable, not even close. Next, though I'm no fan of RollingStone.com, the next headline is an important puzzle piece from Rolling Stone. Trump is kneecapping some of the boldest plans to fight climate change. Follow me through with this. It matters. It fits into the larger picture. From the report, funding cuts are hitting scientists researching geoengineering, like solar radiation modification and carbon dioxide removal. The most controversial of the lot is solar radiation modification, SRM, which involves releasing aerosols into the stratosphere to essentially dim the sun. They continue, while SRM is controversial, many scientists feel it should be studied further in case it is needed to avoid some of the harsher effects of climate change in the future. Rolling Stone then states SRM in particular is going to require a lot more research before it could potentially be put into practice, from how to exactly release aerosols to projecting their environmental impact. Let's stop there. Total, absolute nonsense from Rolling Stone. Methods to disperse SRM particulates have been patented for decades. Mechanisms to disperse aerosols from airplanes have been patented for over a century. So why can't Rolling Stone tell the truth? They continue with this. Solar geoengineering would require a small fleet of airplanes or other mechanisms for lofting particles into the stratosphere that would circulate around the whole globe. That's a statement by Holly Buck, an associate professor of environmental and sustainability at the University of Buffalo. And she says the thing about that is we really haven't done enough research to understand what the implications would be, end quote. Let's stop there. For the record, Holly Buck from the University of Buffalo interviewed me years ago, and she is certainly completely aware of climate engineering operations. Question, Ms. Buck, why aren't you admitting to what you know? Is the power structure, institution, paycheck, and pension worth more to you than saving the planet from toxic weather warfare? Perhaps Mrs. Buck should be sent a link to the dimming with as many aware and awake activists as possible openly CC'd and asked to explain why she's not telling the whole truth. Final excerpt from the Rolling Stone article. Not only is the Trump administration killing funding to renewable energy and trying to boost the carbon fuel industry, it is hurting the effort to research and deploy these climate interventions that may be necessary to win the fight against climate change in the long term. Let's stop there. There you have it. Rolling Stone actually pushing the weather warfare factor while pretending the Trump administration isn't already neck deep in geoengineering operations, along with every other administration going all the way back to the end of World War II. Deception from every direction. That's the world we live in. On the subject of deception, an update on the COP Global Climate Conferences. This is another report from foreignpolicy.com. Brazil tries to keep climate cooperation alive. From the report, at COP30, that's going on right now in Brazil, the global energy transition is moving forward without the United States. Yes, it is. Let's stop there. Again, the COP Global Climate Conferences are all smoke and mirrors, while the controllers double down on climate engineering behind the scenes, which is why the U.S. didn't show up. The U.S. government is no longer making any effort to pretend they're trying to protect what's left of the environment. It's full throttle forward with climate engineering and the plundering of Earth's remaining natural resources until nothing is left. Why do you think the U.S. military is now gathering around the largest oil deposit in the world, Venezuela? And if you believe the official yarn about this military buildup and likely invasion is about curtailing the flow of drugs, think again. It's about gaining access to the world's largest oil deposit. Not that it'll do the empire any good on a soon-to-be-dead planet if we remain on the current course. Here's a question. Why aren't the self-proclaimed green community people sounding the alarm about the ongoing climate engineering cataclysm? That's an important question. Send them a link to the Dimming documentary and ask them to explain their denial of the single most environmentally destructive human activity of all, geoengineering. That's not to deny all the other sources of damage. It's simply to state that how can we have any legitimate discussion of climate, anything from any perspective, without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering elephant in the equation. Next from Newsweek, COP30 climate talks flooded with carbon fuel lobbyists. What a surprise. Consider that it takes an inconceivable amount of oil to keep the carbon fuel carnival going and the climate engineering jets flying. From the report, more than 1,600 carbon fuel lobbyists registered for the COP30 climate talks underway in Brazil. And where did the previous talks take place? In oil-producing nations, with oil companies' CEOs running them. No conflict of interest there, right? The report then states that the carbon fuel industry lobbyist influence deepens year after year, making a mockery of the process and the communities suffering its consequences. Let's keep going. More puzzle pieces from the UK Guardian. $170,000 a minute why Saudi Arabia is the biggest blocker of climate action, and of course, behind closed doors, the biggest promoter of climate engineering. From the report, the Desert Kingdom depends on oil dollars, but its people already face a climate at the verge of livability. In other words, almost uninhabitable there. What's going on, the report asks? Question mark. Let's stop there. Not hard to explain that question. The rulers won't let go of their power, and their populations refuse to face reality. Next stop, planetary omnicide. For the record, heat index temperatures, aka the feels-like temperatures in parts of the Middle East, are now routinely over 150 degrees. Yes, 150 degrees. Again, that's a heat index temperature. Totally and completely unsustainable. The $170,000 a minute that the Saudis make from oil sales won't matter for much longer. Wait and see. Let's add this from Bloomberg. How the world is quietly winning on climate. They then say perhaps it's time to give up on climate? Question mark. Let's stop there. Yes, as the world bakes and burns between the climate engineering chemical cooldowns, I'll get to that shortly, the controllers in far too many in first world populations are indeed doubling down on denial. More of the same from the UK Guardian. Rich countries have lost enthusiasm for tackling climate crisis, says COP30 chief, climate conference chief. Exactly. Why stop drilling, burning, plundering, and polluting when you can engineer a chemically created blizzard in New Orleans and Florida while it's above freezing and raining in the Arctic on the same day? That day was January 21st of this year. Just one example, as the weather whiplash chemical cooldowns rage on in the U.S., often with baseball and softball size hail, sometimes record highs to record lows and back to record highs in as many days. And few even question any of it. Just another day on the orbiting asylum. Let's keep going on that theme. From the Epoch Times, Energy Department issues $1 billion loan to reboot 3 Mile Island nuclear plant. Constellation Energy said the upgraded facility, dubbed the Crane Clean Energy Center, clean energy, right, will power the equivalent of 800,000 homes by 2027. What's the real reason they're doing this? We'll get to this. From the report, 3 Mile Island is known as the site of the United States' most serious commercial nuclear accident. One of the 2 nuclear units at the plant suffered a partial meltdown in 1979. Let's ponder that. No big deal, right? That was only a partial meltdown. Let's just plug it back in and see what happens. More from the report. In 2024, Constellation entered a 20-year power purchase agreement with Microsoft. There's the real reason for this, to reopen the plant and power its artificial intelligence data centers. Right, because who needs a living planet when we have data centers? The report then states the Constellation CEO praised the Trump administration and their quick action and leadership in backing the project. Can't leave Bill Gates hanging, right? Got to back him up. Because Mr. Gates is such a wonderful human being, isn't he? The report then says, under the Trump administration, the FERC and the DOE have made it possible to vastly expedite this restart. It's a great example of how America First energy policies create jobs, growth, opportunities, and make the grid more reliable. Really. Reliable grid power from a decommissioned and dilapidated nuke plant. And all to make sure Mr. Gates gets what he wants. Final excerpt from the report. The nuclear project is the first to receive both approval and financing from the Trump administration. It aligns with President Donald Trump's executive order to, quote, reinvigorate the nuclear industrial base. Yes, sheer genius. Soon to be the next Fukushima. Moving on, a footnote on those pesky pathogens that keep escaping from somewhere. From numerous sources, first ever human case of H5N5. That's a different strain, avian flu, confirmed in Washington state. The virus spreads through an animal's saliva, mucus, and feces, or through milk from dairy cattle. The general risk of bird flu goes up in the late fall and winter as birds migrate and come into contact with other animals. We have the GMO mosquitoes. God knows what they've dispersed for the birds. This is one giant biological warfare experiment, and we are all the lab rats. The health department also recommends, the report says, getting a flu shot. Although the regular influenza vaccine can't protect against bird flu, they say it reduces a slight chance that someone could get sick with both viruses at once and cause the bird flu virus to mutate into something that would spread easily among humans. So is that the real motivation here? To scare members of the population into scurrying down and getting their next jab as soon as possible? What a circus of insanity it all is. Next, about the coming scheduled weather for this winter from MSN. This headline, why this winter may hit harder than anyone expects. The report says repeated deliveries of true Arctic air. Why do they need to say true Arctic air so we don't think it's geoengineered, chemically cooled cloud moisture? They say is delivered into the lower 48 states and will create classic ingredients for snow, ice, and sharp temperature whiplash. Yeah, a lot of that happening for the reasons I've already described in many broadcasts, including this one. Let's stop there. That final phrase is key. Temperature whiplash, the kind that occurs when cloud moisture is chemically nucleated to temporarily cool surface temperatures and then called an Arctic air mass. And once the engineered cool down is over, surface temperatures are increasingly rebounding radically, often to more record highs. That's going to get worse rapidly from here on out. Next headline, same theme from USA Today, La Nina versus polar vortex, ? Forecast warns of extraordinary winter weather. They're trying to feed us the script so that people say, oh, it was predicted, so it must be natural. No, it's not natural. It's anything but. The report says a sudden dramatic shift in temperatures high in the atmosphere will dance with the La Nina weather pattern. How twisted and sick are these people? Those people that write this, the people that support it, the people that carry out these operations. We live in a truly sick and twisted world. This issue will be exposed. They can't hide it for much longer. It's time for all of us to do our part to expose it and to expose those that are a part of it. In any way, shape, or form, we must expose them completely. This script for the scheduled weather continues with this. There won't be a clear winter, and forecasters are still determining how cold it could get. Yes, the schedule is still being worked out. More from the report, something unusual may be brewing in the stratosphere, and meteorologists say it could change the course of the winter forecast. They then say this, weather models are signaling the stratosphere could warm suddenly, possibly causing a counterintuitive cooling effect at the surface of the planet. Search the term ionosphere heater. Ponder what you're not being told in this report. Last statement from the report, quote, an extraordinary and unique event could be brewing. Yes, could be. Keep looking up. And don't eat the snow. Don't drink the rainwater. And try not to breathe. Let's keep going. Similar theme. This one from AccuWeather. Here's the headline. It snowed in Hawaii this week while Denver and Boston wait for their first flakes. Report says a winter weather advisory was issued by the National Weather Service in Hawaii for up to 4 inches of snow on the Big Island summits. Let's stop there. Yes, because it makes so much sense to ski Hawaii when many normally cold and snowy mainland locations have no snow. Welcome to climate engineering and chemical ice nucleation. Search the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn more. That is exactly what is going on here. If you don't believe this can be done, please search Chinese scientists engineer snowstorm. All major media sources covered their activities. Do we think that our massively larger military can't do exactly the same thing on a far larger scale? Really? Polar update from the Smithsonian Magazine. The Arctic could have its first ice-free day as early as 2027. The report says the first summer on record in which practically all the sea ice in the Arctic melts could occur much earlier than previously expected. A condition known as ice-free in the summer might cascading effects. What a gross understatement. And could occur earlier. Going back not very far, the so-called experts predicted this would not happen till at least the year 2100, then 2075, then 2050, then 2040, then 2030. Now we're at 2027. For how many years have I ranted at the top of my lungs that the climate collapse is far worse than anything we're being told, and now the so-called experts, armies of them, tens of thousands, are finally forced to start telling the truth because they can no longer hide it. How is it that I knew and they didn't know? I was looking at data. We're told they were looking at data. Were they just criminally ignorant of this subject, or are they lying? And about the, quote, could have cascading effects comment in this article, what a gross understatement that is. When we lose the polar ice, the heating goes exponential. The air conditioners of the planet are broken. The oceans superheat in the polar regions. Formerly frozen methane deposits on the seafloor release on a massive scale, blowout, methane enters the atmosphere. Venus syndrome. That's exactly what it is. And they're saying it could have cascading effects. Again, we're back to comparing that to if you jump off a 100-story building, you might have a problem when you faceplant on the concrete below. So-called scientists that wrote this report get even more off the reservation. They say even though the outlooks seem negative, the scientists point out that if we stick to the 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming, ice-free days could potentially still be avoided. Yes, and if pigs had wings, they could fly. We have long since blown past the facade 1.5 degrees C threshold. We're in a runaway climate collapse event now. The breakup of polar ice is baked into the equation. There's no going back. Climate engineering, in the attempt to mask the catastrophes at the poles, has only further fueled the overall meltdown. Moving on, more lies from sfgate.com. Atmospheric rivers nearly wipe out severe drought in California. They say currently most of the state of California has no drought conditions whatsoever. Yes. Everything's fine. Go back to sleep. Never mind the rain data falsification. Never mind the torched, dying, and dead forests in California. Never mind the toxic rain and snow runoff, the collapsing farms, the rapidly depleting aquifers. Everything's fine. Nothing to see here. For the record, though, there was some flooding in some places. The heavily hyped forecast of major flooding in many parts of California was, for the most part, not what we were led to believe again. And what do they say on so-called forecasts now? It used to be rain. We used to get rain here where I live constantly, 70 inches plus a year. Now what do we get in the forecast? Terms like this: a few drizzles, some mist and rain, scattered showers, occasional showers, couple of showers. It's this toxic, freezing mist for days without any rain, featureless skies. You can hear aircraft going overhead. In my non-commercial route location, it sounds like I'm at the end of an LAX runway as they're seeding this cloud moisture with chemical ice nucleating elements. No, it's not jet exhaust. No, it's not condensation. We've tested this precipitation hundreds of times. Literally, it's packed with climate engineering elements. That's why everything on the ground is dying. Soil microbiome, root systems. And then there's this. How are the defoliant-treated deciduous tree leaves looking? Anything but natural. Dead, crumpled, spotted leaves hanging on trees after specific fall rain, sometimes hanging on those trees for months unless a strong wind blows them off. Geoengineeringwatch.org, working with the University of Minnesota, tested fall rains there and found chemical defoliants that force deciduous trees into dormancy to create the impression of a change of season when it hasn't been cold enough for natural leaf drop and dormancy to occur. Again, trees now constantly blow over because their root systems are dying back and shrinking, just like the crowns are dying back on so many species. Decades of toxic rain is to blame, and yet no public protection agency is saying anything. Is that how we make America great again? By pretending everything is fine when it's anything but? Moving on, more on the scheduled weather from sfgate.com. National weather pattern change set to arrive in California for Thanksgiving. They say forecasters are warning irregular weather could be in store for California through Thanksgiving. They continue. Temperatures across the state are predicted to lean cooler than normal from at least Saturday, November 22nd until Black Friday, according to a national memo flagging a potential significant pattern change from the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center. Translation: the scheduled weather script reading center. They continue. The original forecast for the end of November going into December was quite different. So this bulletin shows that new factors came into the forecast. Let's stop there. Translation: an alteration of the climate engineering script. There's more. They say we are leaning on the colder side because a lot of the heat that was coming our way will actually now be transported to the East Coast. And a potential sudden stratospheric warming event, which involves cold air from the polar regions, is pushing south. That sudden change, they say, will occur after Black Friday and could involve some turbulent weather for travelers. There you have it. The scheduled weather, courtesy of the climate engineers. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast installment number 537. I've never missed a week. November 22nd, 2025. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate intervention operations known as geoengineering, aka weather warfare. Global Alert News is aired on a number of AM and FM stations around the country. If any radio station near you is willing to air the GAN broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming. This is our best tool for waking others. The Dimming fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. Over 26 million views and counting. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. There is so much data on our website. I know it can be overwhelming, but you go category to category and pick out what you want to view or review. It's a data repository. That's the point, so that people can educate themselves on this issue. How do we reach those that are still not looking up? Start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images, pictures worth 1,000 words. We have new Geoengineering Watch hoodies to go with our new Geoengineering Watch shirts, including blue. And photos of all these are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards, bumper stickers, all of these. Very effective tools to strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Again, our printed materials we pass on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We have one goal. I have one goal, one mission. I live for the day when this greatest of all human insanities, playing God with toxic weather warfare, when it's exposed and halted, and all those that participated actively or passively brought into the full light of day so that a justifiably enraged population can hold them legally and morally accountable, because that's what they deserve. Reaching a critical mass of awareness on the climate engineering issue, it's the great imperative of our time. If we don't win this battle, all is lost. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. We must awaken those participating military brothers and sisters that are being lied to, being told they're doing something benevolent, something for the common good, which couldn't be further from the truth. We have to wake them up and their families. If we can simply push this issue to the full light of day, the fur will fly. It will definitely fly. Shockwave around the globe. Overturning of the paradigm. Will our troubles be over? Absolutely not. But it will be a quantum leap in the right direction, and that's worth fighting for. To all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering insanity, my deepest thanks and gratitude to you forever. Moving on, next a weather warfare update from the other side of the world from CNN. Heavy rainfall floods the camps of displaced Palestinians in Gaza. And this from Drop Site News. Tents in Gaza collapse from rain as Palestinians struggle with massive flooding. Report says heavy winter storms in Gaza put hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in tents at risk as Israel continues to restrict emergency aid. End of headline. Word for word from the headline. And then there is the 40-year-long weather warfare engineered drought in Iran. I wonder why people in that part of the world aren't fond of Western powers. Engineered, devastating deluge, and deadly drought scenarios, hallmarks of climate engineering operations. And for those that don't know or haven't heard me cite this on previous broadcasts, we have the leaders of Iran and their science community stating on film on the record that NATO weather modification operations have been cutting off their precipitation for 40 years. I wonder why they don't like us. Here's a headline on how bad it is in Iran. And if you think this isn't coming to the U.S., think again. U.S. Southwest, next on the list. From SBSnews.com, the worst possible situation. This major city only has a few days of water left. 15 million people are currently facing severe water shortage in Tehran in what has become a very dry autumn. Across Iran, there has been record low rainfall and many of the main reservoirs are almost dry. We are losing the possibility of living in our own city, in our own home, in our own country. Quote, that's from the headline from NBC News. Taps run dry as water crises force Iran to consider evacuating its capital. Try to ponder that for a minute. Evacuating 10 million people to where? The whole planet is dying. There's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to hide. And as cascading collapse continues to accelerate around the globe, far sooner than almost any dare to imagine, no one will be able to help anyone. Everyone will be looking for their next bite of food, their next drink of water, and somewhere to shelter. If they've managed to live through the 442 nuclear power plant meltdowns that will come as society collapses, and this isn't even taking into account likely nuclear weapons exchanges. So let's try to put this all into context. We have extreme flooding in Gaza, putting civilians there into even more misery than they've already endured, and we have the devastating decades-long drought in Iran with stated weather warfare going on there for those decades. With all that in mind, let's add this from Forbes.com. In drought-stricken Iran, nature is doing what sanctions and airstrikes could not. No, not nature. Covert weather warfare. More from the Forbes report. In recent months, Iran has been hit on every flank. A newly re-elected Donald Trump has revived and expanded his maximum pressure doctrine, rallying allies to tighten economic and diplomatic screws on Tehran. He backed Israel and joined Benjamin Netanyahu in carrying out the most extensive strikes on the Islamic Republic in modern history. Again, they haven't invaded anybody for 250 years, but hey, who cares? They have oil. And yet, the report says, for all the speeches, resolutions, and airstrikes, the most devastating blow to Iran's future is not coming from Washington, Jerusalem, or New York. Well, that's to be debated. It's coming from the sky. That's true. That no longer rains, from rivers that no longer flow. Devastating drought has created a scenario worse than what Trump and Netanyahu could have deliberately designed. Are we to think that they didn't? Yes, if plan A, B, and C don't work, go to plan D for drought. For those that are still clinging to the belief that the true power brokers behind the curtain care more about them than people in far-off lands, rich in oil, think again. In the southwestern U.S. from Fox News, case in point, states miss Colorado River water sharing deadline, uncertainty grows. That's far worse than just uncertainty. Report says 7 states, including Arizona, missed the deadline to agree on a new plan for apportioning Colorado River water, raising concerns among experts about the future management of the crucial resource. This is a cataclysm unfolding by the day, and people are in total denial. Total denial. I've talked to some people there that believe somehow there's a magic aquifer that'll save them. The aquifers are radically depleted as well. Trouble's coming fast for the U.S. Southwest. Wait and see. In another part of the world, more weather warfare is being waged. From Earth.com, rice harvests are collapsing under more intense flood scenarios. Rice caught in climate whiplash. We see that term a lot now, don't we? They say research has shown that sequences of weather whipping from drought to flood and back again result in nearly twice the rice yield lost compared to individual flood or drought events alone. Yes, all part of the plan. From Yahoo News, farmers left reeling as key harvest is down 70%. This report refers to Canadian farmers for certain crops. From the Japan Times, Japanese oyster farmers face crisis amid mass die-offs. Another footnote, fish farms around the world are facing mass die-offs as well. No surprise. This has been ongoing and accelerating. Farm fish are one of the most toxic foods on the planet. Wild fish populations are also plummeting around the world, both saltwater and freshwater, and even wild-caught fish are ubiquitously contaminated. This is fact, not speculation. Another from the Japan Times, nuclear plant in Fukushima starts 5th round of treated water discharge. Yes, that's a part of the problems with the ocean, but there is so much more. The oceans have been used as a toxic dumping ground for nuclear waste and all other forms of toxic everything for so many decades. From phys.org, climate change is now warming the deepest parts of the Arctic Ocean. Yes, this is a very big problem. The following headline is an example. Another from phys.org. Aliens, ? Submarines, ? Gassy whales, ? Mystery bubbles off California coast spark intrigue theories. This is methane. It's methane fields thawing and releasing, and they're making a joke out of it. Is it going to be a joke when our planet turns into Venus? For those that don't believe such a scenario is possible, please search geoengineeringwatch.org Venus syndrome. Learn what most would rather not know. And yes, climate engineering operations, aka weather, chemical, and biological warfare in our skies, is the single greatest human factor hurtling us toward that trajectory. And that's on top of the endless list of other incredibly destructive human activities. Let's do a quick economic update, because with biosphere collapse, there is no economy, there is no civilization. It's unraveling already. From CBS News, foreclosures are surging as U.S. homeowners grapple with rising costs. From Reuters, Europe's banks face unprecedentedly high risk of shocks, ECB warns. From BusinessInsider.com, there's an artificial intelligence bubble you may not know about, and it could soon come for your electric bill, referring to the data centers sucking up all the electricity. From the Financial Times, Oracle is already underwater on its astonishing $300 billion OpenAI deal. From Investing.com, Peter Thiel dumps entire NVIDIA stake, slashes Tesla holdings amid bubble fears. From India Today, taking a moonshot, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are racing to build data centers on the moon. How stupid can this whole thing get? On the moon, that we supposedly were driving an EV dune buggy there in the 60s and we forgot how to go back. We've lost the technology to go back. We taped over all the film reels because they were expensive and nobody was watching them. The insanity just goes on and on. What people have been fed, what they believe to be true, and statements like this, they're going, I don't have the words anymore, man. While everybody pretends that the climate engineering raging in our skies that all but the clinically blind can see, well, that's not really happening though, right? Don't believe your lying eyes. From the IrishStar.com, fans stunned as Farmer's Almanac releases final winter prediction before shutting down after 200 years. Hard to predict the weather with climate engineering going on, isn't it? I wonder why they're closing. On the subject of despots that are worshipped as deities, Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological phenomenon when captives develop positive feelings toward their captors or abusers. Is that not absolutely epidemic in this country? Perception management. That's a term originated by the U.S. military, the U.S. Department of Defense, and they give this definition. Actions to convey and or deny selected information and indicators to audiences to influence their emotions and motives. Translation: power structure programming. Let's ponder some nuggets of wisdom from George Carlin. Quote, "The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything." Carlin continues, "They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interests. They don't care about you at all. Not at all." Carlin says it twice. "And nobody seems to notice." He continues, "Nobody seems to care. That's what the owners count on. Because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it." And how true that is. You have to be asleep to believe it. And even now, how many are exactly that? Completely and totally asleep at the wheel. With all that in mind, from the UK Guardian, U.S. on a trajectory toward authoritarian rule, ex-officials warn. From that report, a network of former intelligence and security officers says democratic decline is accelerating under the Trump presidency. The United States is on a trajectory toward authoritarian rule, according to a sobering new intelligence-style assessment by former U.S. intelligence and national security officials who warn that democratic backsliding is accelerating under this administration, and many may soon become entrenched without organized resistance. This is not an endorsement of any other administration. It's simply to say that it's now worse than ever before. Those in power know exactly what's coming, and they're doing their best to lock down and cull populations before it hits. The report, titled Accelerating Authoritarian Dynamics Assessment of Democratic Decline, was released by the Steady State, a network of more than 340 former officers of the CIA and NSA, the State Department, and other national security agencies. The authors conclude with moderate to high confidence that the U.S. is moving toward what scholars call competitive authoritarianism, a system in which elections and courts continue to function but are systematically manipulated to consolidate executive power and weaken checks and balances. According to the assessment, these trends are increasingly visible in the U.S. as part of a broader effort by this administration in his second term to ensure loyalty and ideological conformity across the federal government. How can anybody argue that this is the truth? And for those that think and thought and tried to pretend that this administration was going to somehow stop climate engineering, it's only getting worse. They're only doubling down. And why would we have expected otherwise? I never did. Never. The occupants of the White House are selected, not elected. It's been so for decades. It's all about empire. On that note from nakedcapitalism.com, the diminishing returns of victory, empire in the age of climate tipping points. From that report, imperialism has always come with a high body count. That remains true today, with U.S. efforts to retain what is left of its hegemony. Sanctions warfare, either direct or proxy, genocides, and exported class warfare all leave devastation in their wake. In many ways, U.S. imperialism is similar to other colonial projects that came before it. Yet, there's one obvious difference: our knowledge of unfolding and accelerating abrupt climate collapse being further fueled by climate intervention operations. The decision of the United States to go full scorched earth as its empire crumbles is only making a very bad situation exponentially worse. And yes, that's exactly our trajectory. Full throttle, loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute until absolutely nothing is left to salvage. It's not a coincidence that all the countries and regions being targeted by Washington also happen to sit on the largest known oil and gas reserves in the world. As the U.S. doubles down on a dystopian future filled with carbon fuels, climate chaos, further fueled by endless weather warfare, and a hierarchical class structure protected by a robust police state. The bottom line, the complete collapse of the current paradigm is a given. It's baked into the equation. There's no going back. But this question remains: if enough of us summon the courage to rise to the occasion, to ponder the primary point and purpose of our existence, we may yet alter the equation in the right direction, even at this late hour. I have many times been told that I need to be more optimistic, that I need to look at the bright side of things, that I need to spread more hopium. My answer is this: my mission is to share the truth, just as available data dictates, no matter how dire the truth may be. Pulling punches and pretending that Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny are going to save us all from ourselves is exactly the path that has delivered us to this very dark hour in the first place. Only by fully facing the absolute unspun truth do we have any chance of altering our current trajectory toward mathematically certain, extremely near-term planetary omnicide. Perhaps this is the part when many turn this broadcast off and tell themselves it's too depressing, and that somehow everything will magically work out. Really? Is that the path out of the looming self-annihilation tidal wave towering over us all? When I see panoramic film footage of various megacities all over the world, I can't help but ponder their impermanence. They are, in geologic terms, nothing more than a proverbial flash in the pan. And yet the vast majority believe that these grossly unsustainable human constructs are forever features. Even as the planet's primary life support systems completely unravel, even as the entire web of life is circling the drain. How can it be that so many can possibly believe that turning nature into a never-ending stream of always escalating toxic trash is somehow sustainable? Such a conclusion is nothing short of pathological delusion, yet the willful blindness persists and perhaps will continue till the brutal, bitter end. And as we wait for the moment of impact, the criminally insane controllers are building more bombs, bullets, and ballrooms with bunkers in the basement. The inmates that run the orbiting asylum are maneuvering their massive military juggernauts of destruction in the quest for Earth's last remaining resources like oil and rare earth minerals, which are the lifeblood of empire, and the mass consumption societies that continue to actively or passively serve the system of the matrix and those who control it. Populations are kept distracted by a constant flow of scripted political theater, non-stop bread and circus, and for the not-so-fortunate, endless and accelerating weather, chemical, and biological warfare calamities. So, Here's my message of optimism for the week. Unshakable solace exists in deciding at your very core that you will not go silently into the night, in deciding that you will struggle against the fading of the light with every fiber of your being until your last breath. Who can stop you from that path? Who? No one. Our God-given will can't be taken ever by anyone. It has been entrusted to each of us by our Maker as our only true possession, and He asks only that we do our best to do what's right. Dedicating ourselves to such a path and doing our best to follow it is a life worth living, no matter what we collectively face. And if enough of us summon the courage to face the gathering storm with this level of unyielding determination, who but God can say what may yet be possible? Only one way to find out. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can effectively and efficiently help in the all-important battle to expose and halt the weather, chemical, and biological warfare taking place in our skies, from which there is no place to hide. It's up to us. We're the ones we've been waiting for. Make your voice heard. Make every single day count. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.